Live?
Camarillo, California, just north of LA.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. How's Cali treating you?
It's gotten weird in the last 30 years. I'll give it that. But,
Last 30 years.
when we first moved out here, it was like Disneyland. And, geographically speaking, it's a fantastic place. But politically
Oh, yeah.
speaking, it's gotten a little screwed up.
Yeah. It's sad.
You
How,
doing any
how about you?
more like
What's that?
Brent is down in Texas at all?
So we're looking at houses in Austin actively right
Mm.
now. That's what we want to move. But it's tough. The market's really, really uh, volatile there.
Everyone, everyone's doing the same thing.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. And everybody tells you, don't bring California here. That's not the intention is to run. So that's what
That
we're
would
trying to do.
piss me off.
Oh, I'll bet. So how about you, Jeff? Where are you?
I'm about an hour west of DC, Baltimore metro area, Virginia.
Gotcha.
Jeff lives on the corner of Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia.
And
So
Virginia. Yep.
so on Friday nights when one state starts shutting down the bars, he just runs over to the other state.
Hmm.
Yep. Just do that. West Virginia last call, I think, was 3:30, 4 o'clock. So we'd hang out in my town in Maryland until about 1 o'clock, 1:30 before the bars is shut down, and jump on Interstate 81, head down to West Virginia, have ourselves another 2 hours to go.
There you go. Yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
So many things.
I know, right? Uh,
I haven't done that in years, though. So many years since I've done
yeah.
that.
Now it's like, okay, it's time to go home. Work's over. Let's drive to
Yeah,
the house.
exactly. Bedtime.
Uh,
And that area also, and Jeff's going to hate me for bringing this up, but it was the most, my favorite thing of visiting him is going to the local Denny's because, you put those four areas together right there and
mhm.
it's like Jerry
Pure
Springer in
entertainment.
every booth. It's amazing.
I grew up in Atlanta, so I know what you mean. My daddy married his sister. Didn't affect me none.
Exactly.
Well, we better start behaving. We only got 4 seconds left. Get the comments out quick.
All right. Hello, everybody.
Hey
What's
there.
happening?
Yeah. So, our first Refresh Friday of 2022. If y'all haven't seen, we've got the man that has been in this business so long and actually killing it so long that the Egyptians were writing about him in hieroglyphics.
Thanks for that, I guess, Alex. That makes me feel so young.
Yep. Go ahead for that, Rusty.
There you go. All right. I'll take it.
If y'all can't tell, Rusty has one of the best sense of humors, and is a ton of fun to talk to. I get the pleasure of talking to him on a weekly basis, just about, and he likes to make fun of me too. So I was just getting that one in real early.
Well, you do make it kind of easy sometimes, Alex, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, Rusty, thank you for being our first guest of 22 and helping us kick off the year.
You're more than welcome. It's an honor. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So,
Well, to kick it off, why don't we find out how you got Market Scan started?
Toof. Well, it's right after we finished the pyramids in Egypt. We got into the software business. So I guess we've kind of got. I think almost everyone in our family's got a little bit of motor oil in our veins. My dad was in the car business long before he ever met my mom. So I grew up in the space. He was literally one of the pioneers of leasing. He wrote Ford's retail lease plan, or RLP they called it, which turned into the red carpet lease, which is that goofy formula. He's the one that came up with that goofy Ford formula. and put a lot of banks and manufacturers in the leasing business, and leasing was his passion. So when I was in high school, I wrote a very early kind of rudimentary version of Lease Profit on this is hieroglyphic Egyptian pyramid era computing, which was a Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 1000, right? It looked like a I still have it. I don't know if it powers up or not, but I just don't have the heart to throw it away. And so when I graduated college, I got technical degrees in software, math. So when I graduated, we wrote a commercial version of what I had written on the TRS-80 and realized we had something we could sell. And it kind of morphed into a big data aggregation product, which then morphed into Power and Other Technologies. And then, wash, rinse, and repeat for, I don't know, the September will be 34 years. We started in September of 88. So we've been doing this for a long time. And
wow,
it's been quite a journey. So.
Yeah. And your dad was a big influence on you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He was a very interesting guy to work with. We were very, very close. I lost him in 2005. He passed away. So I've been doing this without him for 17 years, I guess. But very bright guy. Technically, he was pretty stupid. I know that sounds kind of harsh, but we used to joke, if we traded seats, we'd probably still be working together, but we'd be flipping hamburgers in and out. He was great at building a business. He was great at running a sales team. He was the most talented person I ever met at forging relationships that lasted. And I think if I were to look and say all of the great things that I learned from my dad, that's probably the most important for me is that, business is built on relationships. People like to do business with people they enjoy working with. And, if you have a common goal and you're kind of, all working in the same direction, even when it gets tough, if you go at it with the right attitude, then you're solving problems together. It's very rewarding. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson I learned from him.
Well, you're also celebrating another milestone right now, which goes off the heels of what your dad taught you. I mean, sorry, there was a comment that came in with some vulgarity that caught me off guard. but the in funny vulgarity at that, so as you would expect. But you guys just had a year with zero churn.
Yeah, it was amazing. This API space that we're in, we entered early on, 6 or 7 years ago, but it was very slow to get traction. We started powering some of our competitors, and then there was a couple other companies that kind of came into the marketplace. And then 2, 3, 4 years ago, we started getting a lot of traction with some of the larger companies. And, businesses, the software business, the car business, any kind of thing where you're selling a product, especially a big, robust product, you don't get to schedule your contracts like a dental office, right? We know we're going to sell one today for this much and all that. So, business happens when it happens, and we go after it as, as aggressively as we can. But we had 4 or 5 of our largest customers were all due to renew in 2021. So you're sitting there looking, and that's a little scary because, like, okay, if they all tell you to go to hell, then you're scratching your head, and you got a revenue issue. And but we had a bunch of contracts that were up for renewal in 2021, and we're super proud to say that we had 100% renewal. We didn't lose a single customer, and most of them renewed for a pretty long-term agreement, at least 2 years. And so it's a good indication that our team's doing things right, and the relationships that we're building are lasting. So one of the contracts that we renewed was our very first real API customer, and this was his, I think, 4th renewal. When he started out as a small startup company, he's now one of our largest customers, and they're killing it, and we couldn't be prouder for him. So it's very awesome. Happy year. Yeah.
Does most of your business now reside around data and the API?
Yeah. So, when we first started, we had a desking tool that, and we still have a desking tool that we market to car dealerships. But our original focus was on leasing, and then that kind of changed September 11th of '01. Leasing stopped for a little bit, and we built a bunch of other technologies, retail finance contracts, subprime, tracking all that kind of stuff. But the bulk of our business now is powering companies like FRIGGIN and all these other technology companies that are out there. That's probably 85% of our business. We also do a lot of analytics for lending institutions, and we're just entering the analytics space with the manufacturers also. But if we get everybody, we'll get 20 customers, right? So it's a very fun problem to solve, but there's not as many targets out there for the solution.
I remember stepping into your booth at NADA. That was probably 15, anywhere between 13 and 15 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I think you guys were pushing, I swear it was a CRM, but maybe it was just a desking tool. And it was all touchscreen. And
yeah,
from what I can remember, you hands down the first company that were implementing some type of touchscreen. It was like a flat screen, almost remind you of the old arcade games. You had the big glass panel, and you could touch and move things around. It was pretty neat.
Oh, yeah, that's where the logo came from, actually, the thumbprint or the fingerprint logo.
Mm-hmm.
So and it was back then. We did have a CRM that we called Salesforce Automation. Okay. We had a service analysis and marketing module we called SAM. When September 11th happened, we literally zigged around because we had a product that customers were paying for and they couldn't use it. There were just nobody was leasing cars. Lending institutions withdrew, 0% financing kind of wrecked it. So we built a bunch of different stuff, and our CRM solution was really robust. But we bit off more than we could chew from an implementation standpoint, and we got some traction in it, but it wasn't our passion. Our passion literally is aggregating massive amounts of data and being able to do really cool stuff with that data. And this iteration of our life, if you will, has been right up our alley. We're having a ton of fun every day. We get to work with really bright people, and we get to solve some pretty cool problems. And we don't have to deal with trying to figure out how to implement a CRM in a dealership when they don't actually know what their business process is. So we leave that up to the experts. That's where my hair went, was dealing with the CRM.
Yeah, I'd much rather be behind the scenes, powering everything, all the data, all that good stuff, rather than having to work with the dealerships, like you said, teaching them CRM and all that good stuff. No, I'll pass.
Yeah. Yeah, this model's been much better. It's been really fun. I pinch myself every morning when I've been doing this for almost 34 years, and I still love coming to the office because we get to do cool stuff every day, and that's pretty special.
Well, what exactly is some of that cool stuff? What's some of the different data points that you guys put together and then feed out?
Yeah, so great question, actually. Our organization's automotive payments as a service, right? So we calculate payments. It's all cloud-based stuff. And we look at these payments, we refer to them as scientifically perfect solutions for any conceivable automotive transaction, right? And the application of those, obviously, from a digital retailing standpoint, are pretty obvious. But there's lots of other applications for them from an analytics standpoint. And the most recent product that we built is we're launching at NADA, and it's taken us longer to build this product than any product we've ever built. So it was like a 4 or 5 year project, and our projects typically are 9 months to a year. But it's geared towards the manufacturers, and it gives them the ability to look at the market down to a highly granular level per trim. I know that I've got this particular vehicle, and it competes against these 12 other vehicles from other manufacturers. And we can look at any market, any demographic, and analyze every single vehicle within that space and say, okay, where are we, relatively speaking, how competitive are we against these other trims? And we can show that, and we can weigh it based on a variance in MSRP and all that kind of stuff. So that part's kind of fun. The magic in it is something that we created that we call target acquisition, where if a manufacturer says, look, I want to have the exact same payment, relatively speaking, all these other cars, or I want to be $5 a month cheaper or 3% cheaper, however they want to slice it. They can tell us with a blend of rate, residual, rebate, incentive, bank fee, right? It doesn't matter. There's like 5 levers you could pull on a lease, how they want to get there, right? And it's just a pie slice. So they show us a pie and they can drag the slices around. And then what the system will do is it will tell them the exact rate, residual value, rebate, incentive, bank fee required to create a payment that targets themselves exactly want to be targeted against every single vehicle. So if I've got whatever Ford F-150 particular trim and there's 14 trucks that trim competes against, then we'll give you 14 different solutions, one for each one of the competitive trims. And it's to the penny. It tells you exactly how you have to do it. And the preliminary analysis is that we think we can probably save 10 to 20% in rebate spend from a large manufacturer without changing their volume. And then when you look at a General Motors type play where they're spending in a normal, when things are normal and there's cars on the ground, they're spending $1 billion a month on rebates. If you can save them $100 million to $200 million a month, that's significant.
It's huge.
Right? Yeah. So the few companies we've had an opportunity to show it to, and there's still construction dust on it. It's in quality assurance phase right now, but the reception has been overwhelming, which is great because you spend all this time thinking, okay, this is what we're doing, and hopefully somebody likes it. But you never know until somebody says, "Yeah, I do like it." Right? We love it, but that doesn't. But we're not buying it from ourselves, so it doesn't do us any good to love it. They got to love it too. So.
But that's 5 years of work. Someone better like it.
I'm hoping, right?
I mean, that would be a hell of an advertising tool too, just to figure out, even if I was a dealer and I was dealing with a larger inventory and need to advertise, finding the best payment to stick out there in some ads would be huge.
Yeah. Well, there's a company out there that's doing some stuff like that. Maybe you've heard of them, Alex. I think it's called FRIGGIN Tech. But that was the whole premise behind the M-Drive piece that we built is, let's look and say, okay, shopping by budget, what's the best bang for the buck? And then, from a consumer-facing standpoint, that's a really cool tool, right? Because I got X number of dollars up front. I got $1,500 up front. I want to pay $375 to $400 a month. What can I drive? It's a great way of serving up that type of consumer who's shopping based on budget as opposed to based on, I want a Camaro convertible, right? From a dealership standpoint, being able to do that, look and say, okay, show me everything that I've got. What's the very best bang for the buck that I have on my lot right now? Because that's going to be that's a great ad vehicle. That's going to influence consumers' behavior. Here's a $58,000 car you can lease for $400 a month with nothing out of pocket. All of a sudden, wow, that seems like a great deal. And, those opportunities exist somewhere every day. We just don't know what they are until we run the analytics. And but when you do, sometimes you see some pretty surprising things, right? There's some goofy programs out there, and dealers can take advantage of them. Consumers can end up getting a screaming deal on a car, and everybody wins, right? So it's pretty fun.
One of those realizations. So, we are obviously a consumer of your product, Rusty, and M-Drive is a big part of that for us. And one of the realizations that we see month in and month out is generally about the 8th to the 15th of the month, somewhere in there, is when the U.S. banks and whatnot start to have already seen what all the captive lenders are doing, and now they're starting to release their final rates for the rest of the month, and that's when things get really interesting. You see them just beating the socks off of Toyota and Honda and General Motors, especially, and Chrysler, and it's just amazing.
So that's a great point. It's a very fun time for us when that happens. So, we're just now entering the analytics space for the manufacturers, but we've been in that space for the lenders for a long time. And you mentioned Ally Financial and U.S. Bank. Those two, coincidentally, are two of our largest analysis consumers, right? They buy a lot of stuff from us, and we get to do a lot of different fun projects with them. And both of them are very savvy about how they approach the market. They look and say, okay, what's everybody doing? And then they don't necessarily react. They kind of respond. Ally's really pretty famous for it because they'll change programs in certain parts of the market every 10 days. It's like, hey, look at the obvious distraction over here, right? And then they do something different over there. And it's really, it's fun to watch. They have done a masterful job of really gaining market share. If you look back, not all that long ago, their only business was Chrysler Capital as a captive, right? Because they were the captive behind that scene, and then if you go even further back, they were the GMAC, right? So when they got into a position where they had to go after other vehicles other than the Chrysler products, they needed to understand the market and they needed to be very aggressive, and they've done a great job, and they buy up a bunch of market share. So it's companies like them that really add value to what we do, right? If everybody had the same rates and the programs were same, there wouldn't be a ton of magic in what we do. But when you've got just crazy diversity of all these different programs and people getting super aggressive over here and conservative over there, it carves out a niche that is it's fun to fill. So
Jeff
Alex
benefited
turned that
from
on
that.
Yeah, I benefited with the truck because Alex was sort of gave me the lowdown what you were talking about, and we matched it up with some of the inventory that we have here at the Toyota dealership.
Oh
and,
yeah.
Whenever I went down to him, I was like, oh, I want to lease this Tacoma, and I want to go through Alley Bank, and this is what I want, and this is the payment that I'm at. They're just like, what are you talking about? Where did you get this from?
Yeah.
And then they couldn't believe that, I was able to get the payments down to what it was with nothing down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it wasn't long after that, 2 or 3 other employees jumped on it.
Everybody gets the same truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Tacoma is definitely the winner. They put 70-some% residuals on those all the time.
Yeah, it's more than that.
Yeah,
Well,
36 months. And,
do a 12,000 mile a year lease in Southern California. It's 82%.
Yes,
it's crazy.
Awesome.
It's like a free Tacoma for a few years.
Yeah. That's not a new practice, right? It's something that lending institutions have been doing for years, getting either really aggressive on a particular vehicle or even being asleep at the switch. Now, Ally's not asleep at the switch on any of them, right? They're analyzing. They got some really bright people, and they're looking at stuff every day. But I remember early on. Do you remember the Honda Prelude?
I had one.
Did you really?
Yeah.
So they had the 4WS, the 4-wheel steering hot rod Honda Prelude, and they were stupid expensive for a Honda. You couldn't give them away. And back then, the Hondas had 18% markup in them. Right. This is when cars actually had some profit in them. Right. Nothing's got
a while ago.
And General Electric was in the leasing business in a big, big way with GCAL, General Electric Capital Auto Leasing. Right. And they had a 79% residual value on a Prelude. Right. And then they had this deal where you could extend the lease 6 months and keep the same residual. So a 30-month residual value was the same as a 24-month residual value. Right? And if you did a 12,000 mile a year lease, you could add 3 points to it. So they had a 30-month lease where the residual value was invoice, right? And the dealers had all these things on the lot. You could get these $37,000 Honda sports cars with nothing out of pocket for $299 a month for 30 months, right? And shortly, roughly 30 months after that, when all of those cars came back and then all the Jeeps came back that they had similar leases on, GCAL lost, I don't know, $1 billion in residual losses in a quarter or something. They're like, okay, we're no longer in the leasing business. But, it was pretty fun to watch that. Everybody I knew, I was like, I can't believe this. Hey, you want a Prelude? Let me hook you up with a friend of mine, right? And in every Honda dealership I knew, they blew them all out in like 3 weeks because it didn't matter what they sold them for. The payments were so low. Everybody said yes. So
why don't more dealerships advertise that way? A lot of times it's only the people at the dealership that can sort of put the formula together, keep an eye out, find out which car on the lot right now is, hands down the best value. But you never see dealerships partnering with banks or anything. At least I've never seen it where they partner with the bank or or not so much manufacturer. I guess it would be one of these banks such as Ally, and put that and be able to advertise that type of payment. I don't see with advertising. The only thing I ever see is just the dealerships advertising what the manufacturer's offering. Do you have you seen any, to be able to advertise that from the bank? And I guess maybe because sometimes, like you said earlier, it doesn't last long. It's maybe only 10 to 15 days, but I don't know. I would think that'd be really beneficial in trying to get that type of advertising out there in front of the consumer.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think we'll start to see more of it. There's two or three things that kind of come into play, right? One of them is analyzing inventory that way is relatively new, right? It's something we launched not all that long ago, and we're finally starting to get a lot of traction in it. But we launch a technology, then there's a gestation period from the time that we have it to the time that our partners can actually integrate it into their systems, get it tested, get the UI flushed out, and get it out to the consumers. So the technology, I don't think, has been out there for all that long. I think that the consumers are starting to really drive the change, right? Which is, hey, we want to see things at a, what's my monthly payment? How much up front? How much a month? How many months? That's how people shop for cars. And dealers historically have not wanted to quote things online, but they're doing that, right? So they're transitioning to it. And then I think that depending on the manufacturer, there's some restrictions on how you can market vehicles, right? Sometimes you can't show a payment, right? Or if you show a payment, it's got to be the captive program. Excuse me. I think some of that's going to change. I think that, dealerships are, as long as they've got all this money invested in brick and mortar, they need to be able to kind of dictate the terms and conditions under which they want to do business. And those should be respected. So I think we're seeing some flexibility. And then we also see some renegades, right? Which is, we really don't care what you say. This is how we're going to do it because it's effective. Our customers like it, and our employees like it. And we're in the business to sell cars, not to make you happy as basically a distributor, right? So
hopefully. We've got some questions from the audience I think we'd love to jump into real quick.
Sure.
So before we jump into the big one that's out there, and let's start with an easy one.
All right.
So this is Rick Buffkin of Beeman Automotive. And Rusty, are you including any OEM vehicle options in your payment calculations to help with things like LTV?
100%. So we take every parameter, policy, and factor that can influence a lease, finance, or balloon note program for a new or used car from every lending institution, every manufacturer, every municipality, and every participating dealership. So with our technology, you can pass us a VIN, and we can tell you exactly what the monthly payments are. And those payments are fundable, defendable, transactable, which means they're in bounds with the lending institutions, like you said, loan to value, all of the rest of the pieces that come into play as well. We track all that stuff.
And then here's somebody Tom Harsha.
Who's that?
Yeah. He wants to know where you believe digital retailing is headed this year and maybe even beyond.
I think it's going to take over the world. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but we're seeing such a huge push towards it, right? You put it in perspective.
As in from the manufacturers?
No, from the consumers, right? I think the consumers are driving the change more than anything else. If you go back to the last in-person NADA, which was
2020,
first part of 2020,
when everyone got sick.
That was the week. Yeah, exactly. So that was the super spreader event of the century, right? Right before that, that NADA, we had a party because we hit a milestone in our business. We had 3,000 rooftops on our API, and we were blown away. We're like, we didn't know that we'd ever get to that level, or if we did, we figured it would take us much longer. So we were super excited.
Jesus, you're at 10,000 now.
10,518, according to the ticker outside my office. And we
quick.
had 9,000 of them in about a year. So what happened is all these consumers want an Amazon type buying experience. They want transparency. They want convenience. They want trust. but they want to be able to just go do things online for their cars like they can for every other aspect of their life. And it's exploding, right? So the thing that's been super amazing about it is that it's carved out opportunities for visionaries, and I love giving Alex a hard time because he's good at giving me a hard time. But, realistically, you're a visionary, right? You understand what consumers are looking for, and you understand how to deliver them something that influences their behavior in a positive way and gives them something that they can't get elsewhere, right? And that is, I think in its heart, that is digital retailing or modern retailing. And we're seeing more well-funded companies enter the space now than we have ever seen. And we're also seeing a lot of more openness or more receptiveness, if you will, to really analyzing from a manufacturer and lender standpoint, how do we create these crazy programs that will meet the needs of a consumer, right? Because a consumer doesn't care about all the complexities that go into the program. They care about the results of the complexities. How does this affect my family, my budget, and whatnot? So we're starting to work a lot way upstream with the manufacturers to create these crazy programs, which influences the digital retailing. Then we have to get that messaging out, and then we also have to be able to replicate that in the dealership. And I don't have a crystal ball, but I suspect that if we continue down the path that we're on as an industry, 2023 we'll see as much change between now and the end of 2022 as we've seen maybe in the last decade from a growth and technology standpoint in digital retailing. So
I'm sure that makes everyone all warm and gooey inside.
Yeah, it's a it's a lofty prediction.
Well, you look at how much progress we made last year. It's crazy, right? It's literally crazy, right? And what a goofy year, right? You got chip shortages, we've got pandemics, we've got dealers selling cars for way over MSRP, and I got a really interesting statistic. We were doing some analytics with one of the major manufacturers, and they said we need to see how our standard programs stack up against other standard programs in the marketplace from a maximum rate markup. And I'm like, okay, I'll bite. Why? There's a less than a 20% take rate on our special programs. Even though the payments are much cheaper, they don't allow the special programs. You can't mark the rate up to make paid reserve. The dealerships are marking the rates, so customers are paying a whole lot for cars right now from a monthly payment standpoint, because the dealerships aren't taking advantage of the special programs. They're taking advantage of the additional profit opportunities from the standard programs, right? And if you look and you take that into consideration, right, the average car is $45,000 now. They're getting over window sticker and the rates are way high. Consumers are becoming accustomed to having a much higher monthly payment than they normally had before. When inventory normalizes and, if they put these guys in leases, which I would prefer them to do, but then you all of a sudden have a really interesting dynamic 2 to 3 years from now, because you got customers who are used to paying much more than they normally pay. Cars are now available. The profits aren't like they were before. What's going to happen? Is this guy going to end up with a much cheaper payment? And my prediction is no, they're going to end up with a much more expensive car, because once you're used to making the bigger payment, it doesn't hurt anymore, so then you go get something cooler, right? So it's
For sure.
It's going to be very fun to watch, but
We're all going to be driving Ferraris.
I hope so. So
we got a couple more questions. So Drew Ament, who is wondering if you guys indemnify the payments, rates, or quotes.
For our dealer-facing products that we offer, we do. For our API products, we don't, because we don't have any control over what happens once we serve up the payments. But we do guarantee the accuracy of the data.
How do you get it so accurate? I've worked with so many different desking solutions and payment software, and they're never that accurate. Where if they are, they're still within several dollars. But I know, of using IllumiQuote, and of course, it's, that's paired with your guys' data. I mean, it's always within the penny. How do you get it so accurate?
we joke around, so we got a guy in Tijuana who's super reliable. But truth of the matter is for over 3 decades, we've been establishing relationships with lenders, manufacturers, municipalities to get access to the data. And that same 3 decades, we've focused on developing software to ingest that data electronically. For every line of code of products that we sell to, companies like FRIGGIN Tech, or even the analytics products or dealer facing, then we probably have 300 or 400 lines of code for tools that we use internally to electronically organize the stuff. And that's the biggest part of our job, is staying on top of that. The one super consistent thing in the automotive space is there's zero consistency in the automotive space, right? So every one of them is a custom programming project, but once you get it, then it's wash, rinse, repeat every time it comes, unless the lender, the manufacturer, or the municipality changes the structure of how they do things, which they typically don't. They'll change the values that are in the data set or in the PDFs or whatever, but they typically don't change how they look too often. So, but that's how we do it. It's electronic.
On that thread, I just want to try and get to 2 points here. One, you're more than welcome to mention Roadster and Modal and Drive Centric and all the other ones that you power as well, Rusty.
Well, they're not interviewing me right now, so I'm trying to be nice.
Well, this is Dealer Refresh.
Yeah.
So we're nice to them too.
Yeah.
But when it comes to digesting and eating your API and being able to understand it, there's different ways to interpret it too. And it goes back to Drew's question as to why can't you indemnify the vendors? He wasn't asking that, but that was sort of between the lines. But but when you're working with other vendors, you've worked with a ton of them now in different engineering teams.
Right.
Have you found that there's a different type of engineering team at, each one has its own flavor, and I'm also want to get around to what do you think of outsourcing engineering teams, and what kind of talent does that kind of thing bring?
Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, it's all over the map. And we work with a couple companies who outsource all their development and have just great luck, right? Got really, really bright people. One of them's got a bunch of people in Belarus. Another one's got a bunch of developers in Poland. And they've had great luck with it. We've also worked with companies who have outsourced stuff and spent a ton of time and effort and money and resources and all that, and never got the product launched, and ended up having to literally just start from scratch and go with a different one. So that's a space that we haven't really spent much time in, right? We've always been a software company, so we've always had our own developers. We've outsourced a few projects, but they were I don't want to say innocuous projects, but they were projects that weren't too close to the secret sauce. Help us build some tools or something, and we'll see how that works. Coincidentally, one of them was the team in Belarus that one of our customers uses. They introduced us to it, and they did a pretty good job. But I think a lot of it just depends on what your focus is. For us, we have much more control over our own team members as an outsourcing, and they're a little closer time zone than Belarus, so we don't have quite as as many misses as far as trying to get together on a meeting and stuff. But I want to circle back to Drew's comment for a second. We calculate on average about 250 million payments every day, right? And they're all over the map, from analytics to consumer facing, dealer facing, you name it. So that's one of the reasons why it becomes a little bit difficult to indemnify that breadth, right? For us, if it's our own technology, we control everything that happens and how it's presented to the consumer, as far as you don't have the ability to manipulate a residual value or rate or something that gets you outside of the box. But for the others, when we power it, once we're like the Intel Inside, once we serve it up, then if it gets modified after the fact, then we don't have any control over that.
Well, we've got some other questions from the audience, and thanks for
Okay.
clarifying
I've
that
got
further,
I've got a
Rusty.
quick question before we go. Do you work with any of the major listing sites such as Cars.com, Auto Trader, et cetera, Car Gurus? And the reason why I'm asking because you were talking well, we were talking about digital retailing, potentially really blowing up within the next couple years. Um, but you also mentioned something about shopping by shopping by budget.
Hmm.
And I've seen a lot of the different listing sites. It's been quite a few years, and maybe it's still available. I just haven't taken notice. Whereas they would encourage the customer, they'd have a call to action that would say that shop by your budget. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't ever see a lot of people or a lot of consumers utilizing that. And maybe it's because it ends up not being as accurate, or the results of the different models and trims that come in their search results don't really match exactly what they're looking for. But I would
Yeah.
think with your technology that could potentially take that to another level.
That's actually the goal, right? This part of our technology is relatively new. Uh, we started to get a pretty good bit of traction right at the onset of that last NADA where everybody was in person, which is when we launched it. And then the rest of it, everything kind of slowed down a little bit with some companies, and then some companies, everything pushed really, really hard, right? Um,
Hmm.
but the ones that are out there historically haven't been accurate, and they've been based almost exclusively on retail finance contracts without looking at leases, and without really taking equity position into consideration if they have a trade, and loyalty and conquest rebates and all those kinds of things.
Yep.
And one of the things that you have to get right in a digital retailing forum is you have to provide the consumer something that the dealership can replicate, right? Which means you got to take all those terms and conditions that the dealership's willing to do business under into consideration as well. Or else you quote something to the consumer up here when they go to take delivery of the car, it's different, and their trust is lost. And that's why I gave them 1 star because zero
Yeah.
wasn't available type of reviews. Yeah. So, but I think we're going to see a lot of it. I hope we do. We've got a couple companies who have aggressively been building basically a tech stack to take advantage of this new part of our API. Obviously, Alex and his team is one of the earliest adopters of it, and it's always kind of fun to see what they do with it because you're like, wow, we never would have thought to put that with that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But we're starting to see it with some of the aggregators, and we are working with some of them. Um, Building right now. So we'll just see.
Something like that could be a real good. I mean, that could be an actual game changer for listing sites if they were able to use that data, and then the dealership is using the same company with the same data, and be able to really to cater to that customer's, I don't want to say their budget, but exactly what they're looking for, all the different incentives that are available to them, and really narrow that down, to an actual payment. That would be,
That's the
yeah,
holy
that'd be,
grail,
yeah,
realistically. There's
yeah.
you're addressing. Historically, we've addressed the needs of a third to a half of the shoppers that are out there who, they know they're interested in this particular vehicle and they want to figure out, okay, what's the best deal, right? What's the cheapest way I can get into this that has the most benefit for my family, right? But there's a whole new generation of shoppers, and it's mainly the younger generation shoppers where there's almost no brand loyalty. They need to check some needs boxes and some warm fuzzy boxes, and they got to check the budget boxes, right? And if all that stuff
Hmm.
falls into play, they don't care whether they're driving a Toyota or a Honda or a Nissan or a Chevrolet or a Ford or whatever. And a lot of them like to lease because after a year or two they want to get rid of it and get something else. And being able to look at that, it's so much easier. So
Hmm. Yeah, you are right about that brand loyalty. I was just reading some type of study uh, around the younger generation, and it wasn't so much around brand loyalty, but you could read between the lines as more around loyalty altogether.
sure, yeah,
and they just just not part of their equation.
yeah. I like Anthony's question real quick. Are we seeing issues with too much demand on your APIs to keep up in real time? Great question. No, not anymore. When we first started doing this, it was a big problem. This goes back several years, and we had our own equipment that we hosted in different centers around the country. A few years ago, we rewrote our entire stack using the latest version of .NET, hosted everything in Microsoft Azure cloud environment, and it's all elastic and scalable. So as demand hits it, it just swells, and as demand goes away, it shrinks, and it makes it much, much quicker. So
I think you've earned a fan in Drew today, Rusty. If you didn't, if he wasn't already a fan. But
thanks for the comment, Drew. I'll take that one. So
Drew's a good man and a bright mind. Yep. So I wanted to hit on the accuracy a little more. I mean, Jeff was talking about why he's shocked that it hasn't been a topic, and you see this a lot when dealers are making decisions on pencil tools or with different CRMs, digital retailing solutions, whatever it might be, equity mines, whatever. They just make a quick calculation comparison on one car. Maybe it's because they're busy, and then they move on with their day. But they don't realize how many times if that payment is off or that rebate gets stacked, then if you're not pissing the customer off, you're giving up a ton of gross to get them back off the ceiling or get them down off the ceiling.
Yeah. You have two options. You rewrite the contract or you take the difference out of the profit, right? And neither one of them is a good solution, right? The best solution is to not find yourself in that position in the first place. When you get you look at how much money is in transit from lease, finance, balloon notes, stackability of rebates, all that stuff in dealerships, even down to the goofy stuff, where dealership on average writes a check for $1 to $13 as a refund for overcalculating registration fee, and that's in most of the country, most stores, right? So you get a super high volume store, a guy's writing 3, 4, 5, 600 checks a month. The whole total might be $1,000, which is nothing for that volume store, but the frustration in having to send out a check for $1 on every one of these transactions is crazy, right? And that's the low side of the totem pole. The other side of it is okay, we stacked this rebate and this rebate and this rebate, and I'm $1,500 less rebate stacked than I thought I was going to get, right? And I had an $800 profit deal, right? So what does that mean? That means, okay, I can lose $700 as opposed to make $800, or I can tell the customer's got to come up with a check for $1,500. It's a lose-lose, so you have to get it right. And, there's not a ton of magic in getting it right. There's just a lot of hard work in getting it right. And that hard work is stuff that has to be done ahead of time. And, what the consumer, the manufacturer, the lenders, the dealerships need is the results of that hard work, not necessarily they have to figure out that hard work themselves, because they've got enough. They got a hard enough job as it is to, go through the process with a customer, get them comfortable with the vehicle, explain all their options, explore all that kind of stuff. They should be able to just say, okay, customer qualifies for this, 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 and this. What's the best stack? How do I get him the most money, right? And because that's what's going to make him the happiest. It's going to make it easiest for me to put a deal together. But don't tell me something stackable and then have it not be stackable, because I don't want to have to write that check.
It happens all the time.
Every day. Every day. That's one of the reasons why our business has taken off, right? There's a lot of data providers in the space that still enter everything manually, and 100 people in the Philippines aren't going to get it right, or if they do, it's not going to be in time. And that's literally catapulted our business. It's just, as digital retailing really hit the forefront because of all the shelter-in-place orders, right? The chinks in the armor came to light, right? Here's where all the issues are. And then all of a sudden, what wasn't a big pain point before, all of a sudden starts hurting really, really, really bad. And we were like, okay, how to make the pain go away? And we were, positioning from a timing perspective, we just got really lucky. And we'd like to say, yeah, we
That's
were
awesome.
brilliant. We had a crystal ball and we knew exactly what was going to go on. The truth of the matter is we had a great technology and the market kind of came to us. But
Yeah.
Well, you're also a car guy, and it's one of the things that, after having been involved in building a pencil tool in a CRM company or for a CRM product, and now what we do today, like, the engineers I've worked with have been really good at appreciating and understanding the ins and outs of how car deals are built, and not getting just hung up on this singular path to getting there, and understanding how dollars can move over here and go all over the place to, make a payment less, or profit higher, whatever the goal is. And you, Rusty, are the same. Like, you're leading a company and you understand how dynamic a car deal can be. So I think that probably has a lot to do with it too.
Yeah.
Well,
That's a huge advantage.
Yeah, they're all over the map, and what's really interesting is there's no right answer, right? Every consumer is different. Everybody wants to shop for a car the way that they want to shop for a car. Everyone wants to shop for any kind of widget the way that's most comfortable for them, right? And we kind of joke around. We like the farmer's commercial, right? We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two, right? And what we've done over 30 something years of doing this is we've tried to address every what about question, right? Because you hear them all the time. What about this? What about that? What about this? What about this customer wants to do things this way? This guy wants to see things this way, right? And you hear enough of those and you program to them. You still hear them, but you don't hear them as often as when you first start, right? And, so we've kind of tried to distill it down to how are all the different ways that consumers really want to shop for a vehicle, because they're going to dictate the process. If we try to dictate the process to them, they're going to bounce and they're going to go to another site or another provider that is more respectful of the way that they want to shop. So, we look at it and say, okay, well, there's a dozen different ways customers want to look at things, or 50 or whatever that number is, and serve up an API that meets those needs. And then, work with companies that have very bright people that can take that messaging and present it to a consumer in a manner that it's easy for them to understand and that they'll be receptive to, right? Because you can't feed a consumer with a fire hose, right? Nobody wants too much information at one time, right? So you got to do it right. So it's been crazy, but it's been a lot of fun.
It's an interesting, I'm seeing M-Drive in my head as you're talking about that. That's, yeah. I like that perspective on it. And, yeah. And speaking of M-Drive, that's an interesting product because it speaks to everything that you've been saying today, in a really big way. And that's a computational monster, isn't it?
Yeah, to say the least. So that was one of those math problems that was tough to solve. The M scope, which is our manufacturer facing piece, is by far the most difficult math puzzle we've ever solved. And we got a lot of mathematicians in our building. But M-Drive was a close second. And, to be able to take, a dealership, like when I do demos on the API, I've got Market Scan Motors at Camarillo, which is my sample account. I got almost 1,200 vehicles in inventory, and I'll show a guy that's $3,000 upside down with zero cash and paying $500 a month. And I want to see if I can get him out of his trade and get him in something else and keep his payment the same. And I'll have 35 or 40 vehicles that fit that narrative. And it comes back in, 200 milliseconds, right? You're like, wow, okay, cool. He can get this $58,000 vehicle, he can get this $17,000 vehicle, and everything in between, right? But in order to get there, we have to do a ton of analytics on the inventory ahead of time. And a lot of these payments that we calculate, we calculate 200-300 million payments in a day. Probably half of them are analytics to figure that kind of stuff out for M-Drive.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah, it is. but it works. That's the coolest part is, you go through all this stuff. And then you remember, Alex, when you were one of the earliest adopters, right? So 75% of it was spot on all the time. 25% of it, we had pain points that we had to solve, right? And then, that's one of the things that's so nice about relationship-based businesses. You work together to solve these problems. And it was, there was a lot of work that we had to do on our side to get the product ready for prime time. And working with a company like yours who pushes us for a common goal, then you eventually get it to where it's right, or as right as it can be. And with M-Drive, you don't have to be 100% spot on. If you miss a vehicle here and there, it's one thing. You got to be in the high 90s if you're going to present vehicles to consumers, right? And the one thing that we do know is at least the ones that show up, we're pretty much spot on. And the adoption rate, when you showed us the analytics, was it yesterday or day before yesterday? We were blown away, right? Because you always want something to work. You want it to be received well, but until you can measure it, it's a guess. And seeing your initial measurements and how much they exceeded what you guys had even hoped for really made us feel good. It made us feel like we hit the mark with that one. So.
Yeah, we're pretty ecstatic over here.
We're probably not charging you guys enough money. We should talk about that.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Yeah.
So, Rusty, to put a cherry on top of today, got one last question for you, and Jeff might have another, but I wanted to know if you were able to take over the car industry and dictate what technologies and how people consume them and everything like that, what would you do better than what we have right now?
Oh, wow. That one's a mouthful. I think there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration, right? I would probably completely eliminate tier one pricing, right? That accurately represent what the dealerships are willing to do, because the consumers don't care what the national average of a monthly payment is on a car. They don't know how much it's going to cost. So I'd probably go down that path. I think that I would work towards having a much higher level of complexity in rebates and incentives, where I'm spending the right amount of money to get each particular transaction. I think the lending institutions and the manufacturers should work more closely together to be able to create programs that are more in line with the needs of the consumer. And I think the dealerships need to be very selective about which technology companies they work with in order to meet the needs of their consumers as well. We love the fact that we're in a pretty good position and we're powering a lot of different companies. There are other companies out there that are doing a good job too. And we think that's great for the industry. We think competition is super great for the industry, but the messaging for the consumer for every step of their journey needs to be accurate, needs to be transparent, needs to be consistent. Right? If I get quoted $100 a month higher here than here, my trust is gone. And a lot of times when that happens, it's not the dealer's fault. It's the technology company's fault because they're not taking everything into consideration. So, if I could wave a magic wand, there'd be consistency in the shopping process for the consumer that would accurately represent all of the complexities that the manufacturer needs to bake into their transactions, that the lender needs to bake into the transactions, and the terms and conditions under which the dealerships are willing to do business into that transaction as well. And then obviously get the taxes and fees and all the rest of the stuff right. I think that's going to be the thing that gets us closest to an Amazon type buying experience for a car. And I think that's what is needed. So it should take more than a week to get done.
Yep. I give it, maybe 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah.
So what's the future for Market Scan going into the next year or two? And you keep touching on the automotive payments as a service. Is there an acronym for that?
APAS, APAAS. Yeah. We actually got it registered. Took forever.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there was another APAAS acronym in a medical industry or something, like way outside of what we do, right? And but they didn't register it as a trademark, and but then they were all saying, well, hey, we use that one too, but we finally got it registered. I don't know exactly what the future holds for market scan. I can see us, at least for the next couple of years, our path is pretty clear, right? Which is, continually pushing to expand our capabilities or API capabilities to power more of the needs of how consumers shop for cars and how manufacturers and lenders position themselves in the marketplace to basically buy the business that they want to buy for the right price. And hopefully we get to see more super creative stuff. And, it's, for us, we're behind the scenes, so we get to build all this stuff and power other companies' visions. But when you sit down and you look and you're like, wow, okay, these guys did some really cool stuff. That's super rewarding for us. And it's way more rewarding than building something cool yourself, as weird as that might sound. But, when we're powering a bunch of different companies, we get to see all the different flavors of the way people envision implementing what we do. And, I never cease to be amazed when I see what some people come up with. So we just hope there's more of that.
No, I'm sure that is rewarding.
I bet
That's
there
awesome.
will be.
Oh, I know there will be. I've seen some of the stuff you guys are cooking up over there, so I can't wait to see that stuff happen. So, but I remember an early call with Alex when he showed me something, and I was like, wow. And I even went and found it, the Days of Thunder movie with Tom Cruise, right? When the crew chief says, I see that guy do things in my cars, it just blows my mind, right? And I was like, that reminded me of that. He said, so Alex, sometimes you guys are my Tom Cruise. So, there you go.
I was thinking more of the Talladega Nights is what I was thinking.
Oh, yeah. I'm not real sure what to do with my hands. That's how I wanted to start the interview, but I figured I'd be a little more professional, which is unlike me, right?
I know you've been insanely professional today, Rusty.
I apologize for that. So,
you should.
There's more people on this call than just the members of our teams. So,
right.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't want to see the fallout comments from, down the road.
Yeah, and these things do have a tendency to last forever.
Yeah, I know, right? So I wish my kids understood that. I see some of the stuff they post, and I'm like, you really want to see this 15 years from now, right? Hey, Dad, what was this for? I was like, oh.
You just gave me like
that's one of the benefits of growing up when I grew up. There wasn't any of that stuff, right? The only thing we have is memories, and and we're all sworn to secrecy because even though it was 40 years ago, we still won't tell anybody. And now everything goes on social media. So
they say like 60's the new 40 and things like that. I mean, you just gave me one for this. It's like social media is the new tattoo.
Right. That's about true, right? Yeah. Like, well, you should think about where you put that tattoo. It's not going to look like that 30 years from now.
Right.
I don't get it, man.
What is that? Let me turn my head. I don't recognize that. It's not a butterfly anymore.
80 pounds ago, it was a butterfly.
That's right. All right, guys.
Well, Rusty, we want to thank you for your time today and what you've given the industry. I don't think that the dealers, and definitely not the customers, but the dealers don't realize how much they touch the things that you have given us. Like they'd be shocked how deep your influence has gone.
Well, thanks. It's interesting. We look at being behind the scenes. You get to sit back and say, yeah, we touched that, we touched this. But like you said, I think there's a whole bunch of dealerships out there that are utilizing our services, our technology, and don't even realize it. And that's pretty cool. It's kind of like you get to be the anonymous guy behind the scenes, and you're having a positive impact on people's lives you've never met. That's very, very neat place to be. So we're really happy with how things are clicking along. So, and I got to tell you, I really had a lot of fun talking with you guys, and appreciate you, referring to the hieroglyphs about, me being a million years old, Alex. That made me feel great. But
It's
but
only
all
like
kidding aside,
5,000 years ago, Rusty. It's not that.
well, yeah. Okay,
Eh,
listen, it takes a while to build our technology, right? So you can't just do it in a couple of weeks. But we appreciate the relationship. I'm honored to be on the call with you guys this morning. It was a lot of fun. So
awesome, man. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rusty.
thank you.
All right, gentlemen.
Talk
Have a
to you
great
another
weekend.
time. Yeah.
You as well.